So Richard, thank you so much for joining us today. I just wanted to ask, what are your thoughts about International Men's Day?
I work in an environment that is very male dominated so in a STEM subject, in mechanical engineering, in automotive engineering, which is 91% male workers across the sector. And there's perhaps a tendency to almost create the stereotypical man within that group, whereas we maybe reflect a lot about the lack of women and maybe stereotypes of women working in that sector, but actually there's equally a huge diversity amongst men. In my organisation, as the first person to take shared parental leave, I'm one of the few people who goes and picks one of the first people to go and pick my kids up from nursery on a daily basis in the group that I work in. But actually, now having done that, and I'm very proud of what I do, and I bring it up very regularly in conversations with co-workers. You find actually there's a lot of other people like that, but we don't necessarily make the time to talk about it. And maybe International Men's Day is just a time to sit and reflect about those different needs that people have. And it's maybe also something that in me starts to bring up the question about my role in life in my family. So I am a little bit the stereotypical man, as in I work full time. My partner doesn't work. My partner works part time. But could it be the other way around? And I know they are conversations that I've had in the past with my wife before we had children, but we haven't had them recently. And I recognise I'm slipping maybe into that male stereotype, or that more and more. And maybe International Men's Day is a moment to think about that, but also to discuss that. And an exchange around those ideas and
I think that's brilliant, and I think sort of like it's stereotypically to be male, and that actually when we talk about inclusivity, we're talking about understanding people for who they are, not for who we're socially conditioned to be. And I think it gives an opportunity, as you say, to have some of those brave conversations that often people might feel vulnerable about having, and having that courage to actually, have that chat. But also to raise awareness of things like maybe some of the well-being issues and mental health issues, that the pressures that puts men under to be that stereotypical, sort of man up type trope that we have out there. So.
I think there are some synergies with some of the things I've been discussing, maybe generally in academia rather than necessarily men, but it does equally apply to men. In that, take a typical academic department. Every member of academic staff is in an individual office. You can go and hide in that office. You can close the door and nobody knows what happens so it's a working environment, but you can spend a lot of time where you can hide away. And I noticed that I had a public face and an in my office face, in a sense that I would always try and be very confident in the corridors when I was walking around. That's the view that people had of that's the me that people see. In my office, I have spent a lot of time being very insecure, being very upset. I've cried in my office at work over things. I've been back into it, and things have been so stressful that I've just been there and I've just spent 5 minutes crying. And I don't think that's I don't have a problem with that. That's for me, that's part of the job that I am doing. I almost get a thrill out of having that level of stress. But my public face suggests that doesn't happen to me, and that I don't have these insecurities. But I'm finding I actually do want to tell people that it's okay have that. It's maybe it's not saying that it's normal that people should be crying at work or to that point, but saying that it's maybe I wouldn't have got to that level if I'd have been told it's okay to be uncertain, it's okay to be insecure, it's okay to have things that don't always succeed. And those things certainly become easier with time because you go through the experience of having success and failure. And for me, to an extent, some of that was coinciding with maybe the first time in my life that I had failed at certain things, but it's or felt that I had failed. But trying to make people aware that everybody goes through those emotions, and not to look at other people within the department and think, well, they don't have this. What's wrong with me? Crying in the office. I know I'm not the only person. I've spoken to other individuals who have the same, who've said, yeah, I've done that too. And but the individuals who I've spoken to it about are people who've got a bit more experience, like myself now, and are a bit more open to talk about it. Someone used the expression to me once, and again, this relates to academia, as in you've got runs on the board. So if you look at what you have, you've got some achievements which give you confidence to go and talk more about the times when you've tried things and not succeeded. Whereas maybe earlier on in a career where there's a pressure maybe to try and prove yourself not through effort but through success, and that's a difficult. They're two different things, and that's. I want to try and talk about that now because I can, and talk and I feel that I can talk about it to maybe help others to feel more comfortable with those situations.
I think that's a really good sort of way of thinking about it. And if our sort of viewers try to understand that the difference between effort and success, because I think we've all got so many pressures on us that we have to be successful all the time and not be seen to have these failures, which, like you, I don't see them as failures. They're learning opportunities, because if you start putting that pressure on you. But the pressure is greater, as you say, on men who are working within a certain environment, who are seen to have, certain control and living up to a certain stereotype within that. But then when you start layering on the different sort of intersectionalities of that, if you're a person of color or have a disability or from a different sort of background, that can actually cause different challenges again as well. So, yeah, I mean, thank you for being so open about, your experience. I'm sure many of our viewers and myself can empathise with that and have been in very similar situations for that. But it's having that courage to be vulnerable, to recognise when you can be that way, to start having that courageous leadership, to have those brave conversations with others about those experiences, and do that with a kindness, a wholeness of heart, of which means it transfers to the culture of the organisation of itself. What makes you feel comfortable enough to be able to be open about those situations?
I think it's part of it. I've taken on a role within my department as leading the Athena Swan work, and I said right from the beginning that in leading the Athena Swan work, for me, yes, Athena Swan is built on gender equality and inclusivity, but I wanted it to be more than that. I wanted it to be inclusivity for everyone. As I say, in a department of mechanical engineering and an automotive sector where it's 91% male, you can alienate a lot of people if it's not perceived to be for them. So given that situation, I feel empowered now to do something about inclusivity, equality within my department. And I think that's what's pushed me to go and talk about it. Maybe that, and a combination of you say, maybe gaining a certain number of experiences, which mean I can put an individual, I don't like using the word failure, but an individual lack of success in a particular outcome I can compartmentalize that much better. So, for example, when I was a PhD student and I submitted my first paper to a journal, having that rejected, that's 100% of your papers rejected. Now, I've submitted tens of papers, and having a rejection is, well, okay, that's 3% of it. I can compartmentalize those things, and it goes, with everything in an academic career of it's papers first, but then it becomes grants, then it becomes your ability to supervise people, things like that. And there's always something that is going to cause me more stress because it's the first or one of the first times that I'm doing something. But I think having demonstrated some success and maybe being rewarded for that success or recognized for that helps. And I'm really passionate about us trying to recognize effort more than tangible successes. And to tell a story, imagine two people who both started on academic probation at the same time, same day. They both have the same target, which is to submit a research proposal 12 months from their start date. Both of them go away, put in 6 months worth of full-time work putting this research proposal in place, and they both get submitted for peer review, and they go to a funding panel, and let's say they get ranked third and fourth in the order of quality of those proposals, so very little difference. Then the funding panel say, okay, we can fund the first three. So one of those people comes back with the ultimate success, first grant funded. Department sends around an email, congratulations, you have won this research grant. Person who was fourth, nothing comes out of that. And the tiny margins in terms of but a huge difference in terms of that recognition. And actually recognizing that effort from those individuals is a really important thing in my view, and as much as recognizing success. Yes, we should celebrate success, of course we should, but I think we should celebrate effort and hard work as well.
That's a really good thought. I mean, and with that in mind, what can we all do to actually help recognise effort more? Specifically, if we're sort of like looking at young male academics rising up, or how can we support each other? What can we all do to help recognise that effort?
I think to start with, we can talk to each other about what we're doing and about about where I guess talking about our emotions as we're going through things, just understanding each other better. So come back in an academic department, everyone has an individual office and you can lock yourself away in it. And it's very easy to think that all the other officers are these machines of perfect productivity and not yours. And actually just being open and encouraging conversation is, I think, a really important part, understanding different people's viewpoints. And I guess coming back to within the department, one of the actions that we that I'm really passionate about in terms of one of the areas that I'm keen to point out is this idea that in recognizing just success, people into anxiety because you're not recognizing it. So maybe changing the metrics, maybe changing what we see as changing what we define as important is an interesting thing to review. There are many examples in life where the metric of success is kind of misaligned with the process of what you're trying to achieve, and it it can drive to poor conclusions, poor setup. So I guess I found that. So coming back to that story of the two researchers, I found out, I guess, retrospectively from when I was in that situation, that funding panels are seen as a lottery. And what's the best way to win the lottery? Well, is to buy more tickets. So there is a clear element of the more research proposals that are submitted, the more likely as a department, as a university, we are to be funded. So actually just you submitting a high quality proposal is part of that success. So shouldn't the success criteria be how much funding are we applying for, not how much we are winning? Yeah. So that's gone very specific, I think, from your original question. So I've maybe had a very specific answer and a more general one.
But I think there's three things which we can pull out from that, which we can all sort of take forward. One, the first thing when you talk about sort of recognizing effort, I mean, really that's about being kind, isn't it? It's about acknowledging when people go that extra mile. It's acknowledging when people do things of which require that extra effort, and realizing regardless of our gender, we still need to be acknowledged for that, and that's good and healthy to be kind in that environment and do that. Secondly, what I hear you're saying is the need for more conversations. So to, sort of like knock on someone's door, invite them for a coffee, buzz them on Teams, or, actually have those conversations. And in that, be brave enough to recognize that emotions are part of the workplace, and that we all need that support. We all need that ability to be able to reach out and just have a chat to someone. And then thirdly, really sort of like changing the metrics of the way that we think about success, both internally for ourselves as well, because we're very much obviously driven by the culture around us, but also with how we actually advise and work to what the university or society deems as success as well. So I think that's three really good takeaways, from this that hopefully might be able to reframe and help others. So thank you for that. Just to end on this, I just wondered who was sort of like the main sort of like male influence in your life that you really looked up to, someone that you sort of like, was really important to you in your life?
Yeah, I guess for me, it was my dad. Certainly growing up, I idealized him as a professional on the one hand. So thinking about the working environment, he's an engineer. I went into engineering. I think there's no doubt that was a massive influence. But also, I see a lot of his professional approach, professional ethics in what I do today. So I think that has had a huge influence on me. But equally, I guess I use it to contrast who I am and how I go about today. So my father was extremely dedicated to his professional life, and that's something that's rubbed off on me, to the point where I remember as a child thinking, there are certain things there are certain times I wish he'd spent more time with me. Now that's not negative in any way. It's not a it's not something I look back at that's marked me at all. But I guess it makes me think now when I'm spending time with my children. So my dad never came to pick me up at nursery on any kind of regular basis. I've made a choice to do that. I have that opportunity, and so I guess he's influencing me in two ways. He's definitely had influencing the way I go about my professional work, but maybe also I contrast what I'm doing now with him as in my approach to my children at this point. So yeah, that's
brilliant. Thank you so much, Richard. Is there anything else you'd like to add around International Men's Day? Or
yeah, there's one other thing to bring up. I was reading your language, an incomplete guide to inclusive language earlier today, and it just reminded me of of imposter syndrome, because it's one of the definitions that you have in there, and I get it a lot. I get it all the time. And I was talking to some individuals recently who were describing feelings that they had, and it sounded exactly like imposter syndrome. And when I said the words imposter syndrome, their immediate reaction was, "Oh no, it's not something that serious." And I think maybe they'd heard syndrome and had this connotation with that. And I think just being able to say, well, I get it all the time. In those conversations, I was able to say, I had it this morning actually. It's a feeling as such that that you get. So I think that's quite a common concept to be aware of. That is more, it's an emotion, maybe not a syndrome. I'm not an expert in that field to be able to judge what it should or shouldn't be called, but my interpretation, is that it's okay to be uncertain. It's okay to be unsure about what you do, and I think it's something that probably everybody has to deal with at some point, or experiences, not has to deal with, experiences at some point. And maybe just to add, I did come across maybe a connected notion, but just a little bit different way of describing it, which is the idea of insecure overachievers. Whether you've ever come before, the research or the publications on it often talk about the legal profession and finance profession, and the concept is that you try and build up a team of people who fit this insecure overachievers category. So they are people who are extremely capable, but don't have confidence in their abilities, or can lack confidence in their abilities. So build a team full of people like that, and then create an environment where recognition and progression is all driven by kind of numerical targets. So in legal terms, how many hours have you billed? In finance terms, how many how much money have you made? You could extend that to academia. How many papers have you published? And it creates, you end up creating an extremely competitive environment that draws upon these skills where people perhaps struggle to consolidate successes because of this lack of confidence in the ability. And I think it links a little bit to imposter syndrome, but is perhaps something that I think retrospectively is one of the things that maybe drove me to be upset and crying in my office.
I can see that, and that kind of resonates as well, because you never feel that you're achieving enough or doing enough, and if someone's always putting a bigger and better target in front of you, you will always strive to outdo that. So the anxiety that builds up within you is quite intense. Yeah. Thank you so much for that, Richard. I think we've come away with some good takeaways there. So sort of be kind, talk to each other, and watch how you measure success, basically.
Yes.
Thanks a lot, Richard.
It was great talking to you, George.
Thank you, Imroze, so much for joining us here today. I just want to say, what does International Men's Day mean to you?
To me, it's about the positive role models in your life and recognizing and acknowledging them. It's not movie stars or sports stars, it's people that you've actually had contact with. And for me, it would have to be my late grandfathers who emigrated from India to the UK. They lived under British rule and experienced partition, and to have that courage to make a difference in their own lives and move over here, I just think it's been such a great. Well, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for them. And they experienced, harsh conditions when they were here. So working in foundries, finding it very difficult for people to let them rooms, but they persevered, and groups of men lived together, and they created a community of support. Really, there'll be people who cook food, find spices, anyone who get their hands on any Indian music. So yeah, they kind of were optimistic, and things slowly changed. Their wives and children could come over here, and I just think for people to have that vision for a better life, and knowing what the risks were, and then just to continue, and they had fulfilling and successful lives. So I always kind of take a step back and just kind of reflect on the lives they lived, and so I could have a better life.
That's brilliant. So it really gives us all the time to sort of, like, as you say, take a step back and take a moment just to reflect and sit with what other people, what basically our male role models have done for us in our time.
Yeah.
And how we can maybe carry on that sort of like the energy, that spirit,
Definitely.
and really live through that.
Yeah, I agree. There's a real need at the moment for men to come together and discuss the concerns that we might have, and we need to acknowledge that there's a mental health crisis at the moment. 3 out of 4 suicides are male. So if we can create more opportunities for people to talk, they might be able to improve their mental health. But yeah, so if I strongly encourage people, if you're not able to talk to family or friends, talk to your GP, talk to counselling services.
And I think that's really important, because one thing that I think both of us probably see with our work at the university as well is the importance of creating that psychological safety as well within the environment. So how can we use sort of International Men's Day as a way to promote that, to get people talking more, to help craft a culture that is more safe?
I think it's a stigma, I think, that we need to reduce, because there's these masculine kind of roles that people try to live up to, and that word man up, something's wrong, man up, it just doesn't work. You're right, we need to create places where people feel encouraged that they can speak, and it's confidential. So we've piloted a men's only group. It's a safe place for people to come along and talk, and there's only 4 questions that people are asked, and it's all to do with their mental fitness and well-being. So there's no surprises. You'll get the same questions every week, and from research it's proven that if you know what the content will be and what the questions will be, you're more likely to attend, and more males would participate.
Brilliant. So how do people, sort of men, find out more about that group?
Yeah, if you just contact the Wellbeing Service, email us, and if you're interested to attend the group, then we can add you to the waiting list, and we most likely will start it in December.
Okay, that's brilliant. So I'm hearing you sort of like talk about having those open conversations and that safe environment. That requires quite a bit of vulnerability, you know, to actually, as you say, sort of like go beyond the stereotype of this default male that has to be this certain way. It's how we actually help people to feel that it's okay to be vulnerable, and actually being vulnerable is courageous, and it's that courageous leadership that we need to see from you know, line managers and leadership, you know, within sort of organizations, to say that that's all right. And that's, I think, one of the challenges is how we overcome that.
Yeah, I agree. It's all part of like the human experience to you know, have struggles and then difficulties, and you know, the worst thing that we can do as men is not speak to people, and just to keep it kind of locked up. And you know, if you remember a time when you had a problem and you spoke to a friend, you probably felt a lot better. And we're trying to create safe spaces for people to talk. And you know, some men don't feel comfortable talking to their partner or their friends, and that's where professional services exist, where you can come along and speak to someone in a confidential setting, and you know nothing will be passed on to your family and friends, and then we can look for you know, the solutions to the problems that you're presented with.
I think that's beautiful, and that really sort of like sort of plays into the idea of having sort of like this kind, trusted culture that we're all part of. It's almost like that sort of like the male trope of recognizing that has limiting beliefs for all of us, you know, and having a safe space where men can explore that and realize that and come to terms with that actually being our authentic self is something that's good. That's good enough. That's what we should be in the workplace. So yeah, I mean, for me, International Men's Day is something which I think there's a lot of different feelings around it as to why it needs to exist and why we need to actually raise the profile of it. But mental health is certainly one of the main sort of like challenges, which, as you say, you know, if we look at the statistics, there's something obviously there that needs to be done. What would you like to see sort of like the viewers doing to actually support International Men's Day?
Just kind of, if there's any males in your life, just to basically check in with them. And all it is a message that, you know, are you okay? And to you know, recognise that the positive influence that they bring. So if there's anyone that any males that you feel that you want to reach out to, you know, but please do. And I think, you know, the more people are able to talk, the more males are able to, just like you say, be their authentic self, the less likely we are to see the statistics that we've just spoken about.
That's brilliant, Imroze. Thank you so much for your time.